Hello and welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop. Just myself today because Anne McElhinney is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, speaking at the Pennsylvania March for Life. We'll be hearing extracts from her speech later, and you won't want to miss that. Actually, we have uncovered more and more neglect by the Pennsylvania Department of Health that shows that this is not about women's health care. This is about protecting abortion. So we will bring you those exclusive details later on. What else is on the show? Well, of course, our movie, My Son Hunter, which reveals the Biden family corruption is going from strength to strength, despite or perhaps because every major outlet, every major leftist outlet is dumping on it. And you have to ask, why are they doing that? And we will be asking that. And we're really big in Japan, Norway, Holland, and Russia. But we're not big in the New York Times. And they really, 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 really hate it when you disrupt their narrative. So there's a new front opened in the war on My Son Hunter, how major podcasts are devoting hour after hour after hour after hour to attacking My Son Hunter. And in fact, including one podcast that is donating almost 5 hours to attacking My Son Hunter. It's quite the podcast, and it's very popular. The guy has 40,000 subscribers. We'll come back to that. And as the UK buries the Queen, who never put a foot wrong in 70 years, Ireland, well, a great little country, their leaders can't find enough truly awful dictators to cozy up to. We'll have a look at that. The war on My Son Hunter continues. The New Yorker, home of Pauline Kael, the doyenne of movie critics, the mother of modern movie criticism. The New Yorker did one of their long pieces on our movie, My Son Hunter. Just to remind you, My Son Hunter is a docudrama, a biopic of Hunter Biden, looking at his debauchery and his corruption and the Biden family corruption. It's directed by Robert Davi. It's written by Brian Godawa and not Brian Godwa, as some people in the production call him, not Matt Godwa, as some journalists call him. It's Brian Godawa, and you can find out more. Brian is a novelist, a screenwriter. You can find out more about him. It's Brian Godawa, BrianGodawa. Go to Amazon now, buy his biblical fiction. It's very, very interesting material he produces. But anyway, Brian is the writer, starring Lawrence Fox, John James, Gina Carano, and it's being distributed by Breitbart News, and it really has annoyed the left. They are determined to shut it down. They will spend thousands and thousands and thousands of words telling you not to watch this. I mean, The Guardian donated 2,000 words before the movie came out to tell you not to watch it. Daily Kos donated 3,000 words to tell you not to watch it. The New Yorker is a different kettle of fish, I mean, 2,000 words, where do you start? Well, let's start at the beginning. I think that's all we need, really. So they say, My Son Hunter is not the Hunter Biden movie we need or the one we deserve. And it's by Naomi Fry. And all I have to say to Naomi Fry is this: Naomi, it may not be the movie we need or the one we deserve. I disagree with you on that. I respectfully disagree with you on that. But it's the only movie that anyone is producing or directing or starring in, because Hollywood and the media are a bunch of gutless cowards. Bringing truth to power, my arse. Being sycophantic to power is what you are. I think this is the first movie that has ever taken on a sitting president. It's certainly the first movie that's ever taken on a sitting Democrat president. So you may not think it's the movie we need or the one we deserve, but it's the one you got. And by the way, it's a free country. Why doesn't Hollywood, with its billions and millions of dollars, produce a movie, another movie? Showtime produced The Comey Rule, which was a rehash of the Russia collusion hoax, only not telling you it was a hoax, over three episodes or 2 episodes, a mini series. So why doesn't Hollywood produce the Hunter Biden movie? Because they're gutless. So anyway, that's the headline. Then the second headline, the subheadline: the Breitbart film is an amateurish, often batshit satire, come thriller, come melodrama, come propaganda organ, which switches between modes with the unexpectedness of a surrealist cut up. People talk directly to camera. People know they're in a movie. It's a genre. When Adam McKay does it, he's hailed as a wonderkind. When we do it, it's amateurish. It's not amateurish to have actors talk to the camera. Also amateurish. I just on the back of an envelope, on the back of an envelope, um, I calculated. I think there's something like 120 years of acting and directing and movie experience in something in the top five people in this movie: the DOP, the director, the stars. Then I mean, when you add up all the people who worked on it, there's maybe hundreds of years of experience. And then the rest of that insult, often batshit satire, come thriller, come melodrama, come propaganda organ, which switches between modes with the unexpectedness of a surrealist cut up. Apart from the propaganda bit, that's exactly what we're going for. Batshit satire, come thriller, come melodrama, which switches between modes with the unexpectedness of a surrealist cut up. And this is something, well, a lot of the critics have done. Ben Collins, who's a reporter for NBC, will put the tweet up there. He thought he was very smart and said, they made Biden look too big and too bulky, and he used, a word for a monster, put the tweet up. And, was this deliberate? And I'm going like, Ben, did you watch the show? Like, you're a reporter, you're a journalist. Did you watch the show? The show is as much about a father-son relationship and how the son can't get out from the domineering father. So, of course, we try to make John James a bigger Joe Biden. Of course we did, because that is who he is in the movie. Anyway, we're big in Japan, Norway, Netherlands, and Russia, apparently. Japan, they have, there's an article about it in Japan Newsweek. If anyone wants to get it, I've asked for it, but they haven't sent it over. We're in the biggest newspaper in Norway. We're going to be in the biggest newspaper in the Netherlands. And the Daily Beast, as you probably know, tried to smear the production. Let's have a look at those headlines. Smear the production, calling it Russia's favorite movie. And that was before it came out. This was a big thing. Daily Kos, as I said, 3,000 words. Guardian, 2,000 words. But as I say, they've moved on to this new front. Where they're the podcast world, which is they're now devoting dozens of hours to telling people don't watch this. And Chapo Trap House, which is self-confessed, they call themselves the dirtbag left, or the radical leftists. They said it's the most talked about movie after, or as much talked about as Don't Worry Darling, which is the movie directed by the great white hope Olivia Wilde. So I don't know if you know Olivia Wilde. She was basically the attractive second banana on the very good TV series House. Anyway, before BLM, the smart kids decided she would be the female they were going to push as the next Scorsese, Woody Allen. Wouldn't happen now. It would have to be a POC, person of color, female person of color, probably a bisexual, transgender person of color. Anyway, she was good enough to push back then. So she directed a movie called Booksmart, which bombed, and the critic says it was due to sexism or something, because that's always the reason these female-led movies apparently don't do well, is because the audience are sexist. This new movie, Don't Worry Darling, which is, of course, an attack on patriarchy. Apparently, it's a very boring and incredibly derivative attack on patriarchy. So to deflect from that, I think Olivia thought she would get some brownie points and say that she fired Shia LaBeouf from the set of Don't Worry Darling to protect her actress Florence Pugh. And it was a kind of to get brownie points with the Me Too movement. Unfortunately, Shia LaBeouf had videos and emails of her begging him to come back on the set and kind of throwing Florence Pugh under the bus. So the thing's a mess. Florence Pugh won't do publicity. Shia LaBeouf has basically outed her as a liar. And the movie's not very good. Anyway, where was I? Yes, much talked about. So even Chapo Trap House, they spent over an hour discussing the movie and telling people why they shouldn't watch it. Michael and us, a big movie podcast outlet, spent several hours discussing it. Slate wrote a lengthy piece describing how My Son Hunter was so bad that no one should ever think about watching it. Then decided that this truly awful movie was so bad that they needed to dedicate a full podcast telling you again that you shouldn't watch it. But it's really funny. Even in the middle of their podcast, the deputy managing editor of the LA Times and Dana Stevens, who is the Slate critic, who said, "Don't watch this movie. I watched this movie, so you don't have to." Of course, they start off wanting to attack it, and Stephen he thinks he goes off on all these tangents, but then Dana and Julia, right, are actually forced to admit, wow, it's not a bad movie in places. And you know what? I learned a lot about the whole cover up. So let me just give you a few examples here. So Dana is the film critic for Slate. She said, right, I mean, you would think a movie called My Son Hunter. Actually, let's play the piece. Let's play it.
It's trying to humanize Hunter in a way that I really didn't expect, right? I mean, you would think that a movie called My Son Hunter, that's all about the evil laptop from hell of Hunter Biden, would make him look absolutely, morally compromised. And I mean, while he seems like a very troubled figure in this movie, as played by Lawrence Fox, who I am going to acknowledge, who is an English actor who I think in a crazy way does a really good job humanizing Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
He's a manipulated figure that you feel, I think, a lot of pity for. The movie spends a lot of time luxuriating in the debauchery of Hunter Biden, this sort of well-documented history of his crack addiction and, stuff that Biden himself has written about in a memoir. But it doesn't seem to luxuriate in a way that purely wants to, humiliate and shame that character. I wonder what you think about that, Julia. Were you surprised by either his performance or the way the movie writes Hunter?
It was more movie-like than I expected it to be, and it seemed to understand certain things about form and tone that, it was much more watchable than I thought it was going to be. I mean, I can't say I would send people out to it, but as a document of like, it can be edifying to watch.
So they admit that it's actually a very, very nuanced portrayal of Hunter Biden. And then let's play another clip when they discuss Joe Biden.
And instead, the film presents him as a victim of Schemin' Joe, which its portrayal of Schemin' Joe is more broad and less human and less plausible. But it works weirdly well, I thought.
Yes, I thought it would end there with "it works weirdly well." What does that mean, weirdly well? Look, in other words, it works well, and I kind of hate myself for liking it. And then I think they get to a really interesting part in their discussion. Don't forget, this is them trying to undermine My Son Hunter. Dana, the film critic for Slate, talks about a piece that's just appeared in the New Yorker about Hunter Biden's laptop. And she says, the piece that I sent around, is a narrative on Hunter Biden's laptop. And she found it really weird to read that in the New York magazine. At the same time as watching this, she said, very odd document of the mind of the right. And, then she says, but, fundamentally, the movie's main thrust is that the mainstream media is keeping you from the truth. Another recurring theme is that Joe, the movie, is a lecherous hair sniffer. So in addition to being a doddering fool and a criminal mastermind, he's also a creepy lech. And then she goes on to say, the movie also makes a lot of hay of the fact that it's not very clear. But when news of the laptop first broke in the New York Post, a bunch of platforms, Twitter and Facebook, kind of cracked down on information sharing because it was so close to the election, and it was a sense that the information in the laptop couldn't be verified. Since then, it seems increasingly like some of the information in the laptop probably is real. And, the jury's still out a bit on that. And it's like, guys, you're reporters. Like, you're the jury. Like, you're the prosecutor, you're the defense. Like, the jury shouldn't be out. The jury should be actually listening to you. Why don't you go out and find out if the laptop's real? And, and the reason they don't want, as I always say, when journalists are not curious, because they know the answer they will find will not suit their agenda. So it's quite funny. The headline, as I said, on the Slate piece is, we watched this so you don't have to. And then they watched it and said, you know what, there's actually some very interesting stuff in it. So My Son Hunter, go to mysonhunter.com. You can watch it there. I mean, look at this one, Hal Sparks. I took a screen grab of it. He devoted 4 hours and 56 minutes describing in detail why you shouldn't watch My Son Hunter. God awful movies, right? They're a podcast, a very successful podcast that basically attacks old Christian movies, Christian movies from 2 or 3 years ago. They go through it scene by scene, making fun of it. And they're good because they're comedians. They can definitely get a laugh or two. They declared an emergency last week. Don't forget, they declared an emergency and spent almost 3 hours attacking My Son Hunter. It's the first time they've attacked a contemporary movie that's released at the same time. This is an emergency for the left. So if it's an emergency for the left, you need to respond appropriately and go to mysonhunter.com, buy the movie, send the link to as many people as you can, get as many people as you can to watch this movie, because the left hate it, and they hate it for a reason. So we'll go over now to Anne. Anne, as you know, was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, speaking at the Pennsylvania March for Life. Let's play some excerpts of her speech.
Thank you very much for having me here. When I heard you were having this rally, I just had to be here. Dr. Kermit Gosnell is serving 3 life sentences for delivering babies alive and then cutting their necks with scissors. And he did it for decades. The grand jury believed that he killed thousands in that particular way. I got involved in this story when I heard the testimony of the abortion doctors who were asked to explain what a legal abortion was in a courtroom in Philadelphia. Their testimony and the evidence that was presented in Gosnell's trial is the most powerful picture of abortion in the United States that exists. One doctor, for example, was asked, "So, how many abortions have you performed in your career?" And the jury gasped when the answer was 40,000. It wasn't the last time that they gasped. Another doctor, abortion doctor, was asked on the stand, "What happens if a baby is born alive?" And the answer was, "Well, really, we just keep it warm. Eventually it will pass." I can translate that for you. They call it comfort care. It's called neglecting a child to death. And it's legal. It's legal. It's perfectly legal. Another doctor was asked during Gosnell's trial to describe a legal late-term abortion. And the testimony was, well, you're basically pulling out an arm or a leg or something like that. During the trial, Jimmy Johnson, the janitor, was on the stand, and he was asked, "Well, what did you do?" "Well, I was very busy," he said, "because the toilets got clogged." And they said, "Clogged with what?" And they said, "Well, bits." "Bits of what?" "Well, like arms and legs." And the world's journalists, and especially American mainstream journalists, did not think that that was a story worth reporting every day. You've probably heard of Michael Brown. Everyone's heard of Michael Brown. In Ireland, everyone knows Michael Brown. But no one in Ireland and no one around the world knows the name of Samika Shaw, a young African-American mother who died because of an abortion at Gosnell's clinic. Her name is not a household name. Why is that? You know the answer of why her name is not known. You know the answer to this. That's why I did this. I have now, as you heard, I have now made a movie. I've written a book. We had a play in New York. And the most recent thing we've done, and I need your help here, and I'm going to ask the guys at the back to put it up here. We have made a 6-part true crime podcast about Gosnell, interviewing the detectives, interviewing victims, interviewing the prosecutors. There is a QR code up there. Here's what you have to do for me. You have to take the QR code, you have to listen to the podcast, 6 episodes, and you have to share it. Particularly young people love true crime podcasts. This true crime podcast, when it came out, it was in the top 10 of true crime podcasts around the world. The story is extraordinary. They tried so much, journalists tried so hard to cover up this story. And you know why they wanted to cover up this story? Because they don't want people to know the truth about abortion. Because when you know the truth, you're not the same afterwards. It's easy to talk about Planned Parenthood. It's not easy to talk about arms and legs being pulled out. But that's the reality. And the reason I really wanted to be here in Harrisburg, and this is really, really important, many of you may talk to people and talk about Gosnell, and people will say to you, well, he's an outlier, he's an outlier. Shut up. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why he's not an outlier. It is illogical that he is an outlier. I will tell you why. We are in progressive Pennsylvania. We are in progressive Harrisburg. It doesn't get more progressive than this. There's a Department of Health in this town. Thousands of people work there. Thousands. Over 1,000 people work there. Gosnell operated for decades. During those decades, Karnamaya Monger died, a Bhutanese refugee. Samika Shaw, a young African-American mother, died. And the people who work in Harrisburg, in the Department of Health, did not leave their desk. They did not leave their desks to investigate. They did not think it was worthwhile to get off. I'm from Ireland. Give me a glass of wine and you'll hear some awful language here. They did not think it was worthwhile to get off their backsides and go and investigate the death of these two women in progressive Pennsylvania. And those women represent populations that apparently are really important to progressives. African Americans and refugees. A refugee died and they didn't investigate. And you know what? They still don't care, and I'm going to prove it to you. And by the way, I'll tell you who's also to blame for Gosnell. A Republican governor called Tom Ridge is responsible for Gosnell. A Republican governor is responsible for Gosnell. He came into power on a pro-choice ticket and immediately instructed the Department of Health to go easy on inspections, not to do anything that might interrupt a woman's right to choose. And sometimes people say, you know, this thing with the Department of Health and the Department of State here in Pennsylvania is a conspiracy. It's much worse than that. It's much worse than a conspiracy. It's a consensus. It's a consensus. They will do anything to protect abortion. And I am going to prove it to you. When we did this podcast, it's a 6-episode podcast. You are going to download it. You are going to listen to it. Promise me you will do that. Promise me you will share it with every young person you've ever met. I'm watching and I'll be looking. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. For this podcast, we interviewed everyone involved in the Gosnell case. And we brought the prosecutor, Christine Wexler, to the clinic. And we stood outside at 3801 Lancaster. And Christine said, look over there. I think the door is open. Now, Christine is was an assistant district attorney. She's a lawmaker. She's not going to be doing anything illegal. But I'm a journalist, unlike a lot of people who call themselves journalists. We went in there. The place has not changed. There is a smell of death. Gosnell's pornography is still in his office desk. But when you go through the clinic, guys at the back, can you put up a photograph for me, please? Are we seeing this photograph? That is file upon file upon file upon file of women who had abortions at Gosnell's clinic. Talk to me about their HIPAA rights. Talk to me about HIPAA. That's how much the Department of Health in Pennsylvania, in progressive Pennsylvania, care about privacy. Those files have women's telephone numbers, their addresses, a number of abortions they've had, and most importantly as well, have they left that picture up there still? Take a photograph of that and share it everywhere and ask the Department of Health in Pennsylvania why they don't care about these women. Why don't they care about these women's privacy? It's appalling. And if there's any journalists out there, this is a story that I reported months ago, and they're still there, those files. They just don't care. I'm coming to the end. Oh my God, very good. I'm doing really well here. My last thing to say to you, and I'm going to sit down and think, oh my God, I wish I'd said all this other stuff to them. Love you guys. Thank you so much for having me here. If Gosnell can happen in progressive Pennsylvania, Gosnell can happen anywhere. It is illogical. It's illogical to believe there isn't a Gosnell in California. It's illogical to think that there's not a Gosnell in Illinois, in New Jersey. It's illogical. Tell me the logic. Why would you think he wouldn't? For the years and years and years that he was working in Pennsylvania, 3801 Lancaster, the complaints that went to the Department of Health in Harrisburg piled up to the ceiling, and they never inspected for 17 years. Shame on them. They'd be better off asking, this is what I've always said, and I'm going to go. I've always said, if you picked up 2 or 3 random strangers and had them run the Department of Health in Harrisburg, you would do better for the health of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania than this crowd did.
Yeah, it's really worth looking in detail at those files. Like, I was in that room, I saw those files. It is truly, truly shocking. I don't know, there's 10,000 files there. I don't know, maybe more. I don't want to exaggerate, but each of those files is this thin. It's like a couple of pages. How many thousands are there? You tell me. And, the Department of Health closed that clinic and never went in and retrieved those files. They're there for everyone to come in and copy and take for blackmail purposes, for whatever purpose they could put them on the internet. This is not about women's health. This is about protecting abortion and moving on from Kermit Gosnell. And, we're determined to hold the Department of Health's feet to the fire and making sure that they answer some questions. So this story is not over. Oh, by the way, we found those files when we're doing the Gosnell podcast. So the Gosnell True Crime podcast became one of the top podcasts in the world, top true crime podcast. It went into the top 10. So if you want to listen to the story of how Kermit Gosnell was uncovered, it was a routine drugs investigation that turned into one of the biggest cases in Pennsylvania history. He's probably the biggest serial killer in American history. Go to serialkillerpod.com. Let's go to serialkillerpod. Don't forget to leave a review. It's very important that you do. That'll help other people find it. People really love the podcast. It was very popular. It is very popular. So let's keep it going. Serialkillerpod.com. So as you know, the Queen was buried earlier this week. I'm from Ireland. Anne's from Ireland. I'm from Northern Ireland. I'm a subject of Her Majesty. But certainly people from Southern Ireland, they really, they spend a lot of their time, dissing on the UK for Brexit, dissing on the UK for being ruled by Conservatives, dissing on the UK for having the royal family, although they've been a bit more tempered since the Queen died. But have they ever looked at the people who are running their country? So you may remember a while back, I did a piece for the Wall Street Journal, if we put it up there. It's called Mrs. Robinson and the Missing Princess. Mary Robinson, who's the former president of Ireland, big lefty, the first left-wing president of Ireland, actually, very interesting. She was a big fan of the absolute ruler of Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. And his daughter tried to escape Dubai, right? His daughter tried to escape Dubai, a very dramatic escape with her friend. They got jet skis out, they got a boat, they went to India. Their boat was basically, they were basically abducted from the high seas by Indian soldiers, maybe in conjunction with the sheikh's soldiers. She was brought back. She's kept a virtual prisoner in Dubai. And that was getting a lot of bad publicity. And Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland, went over there, met her for lunch with all her family around looking at her, came back and said, she's wonderful. She's doing fantastic. She has mental health issues. She needs to stay there. I mean, it's quite clear looking at those pictures that that girl is not happy. That woman is not happy. Anyway, she's since released a lot of videos, secret videos, saying she's basically been abducted, she's been kidnapped. Mary Robinson has been embarrassed into sort of saying, "Oh, I was deceived." She wasn't deceived. She was helping out her friend. Her friend, I would assume, who is funding her Human Rights Foundation. I don't know, but you know, he is one of the richest men in the world. So that's that American president. Then you have current President Michael Higgins, who when Fidel Castro died, he said he was deeply great. He heard of the death with great sadness. This is someone who has ruled Cuba with a iron fist for, I don't know, 50 years. He executed gay people. He executed political dissidents. There's no free press, no free media, no free political parties, no free protest, no right to protest, nothing. And he says, you know, Cuba, this is Michael Higgins, Cuba achieved 100% literacy many years ago and built up a health system that's one of the most admired in the world. Complete nonsense, by the way. No one, the tourists go there and get treatment, but the locals, they have to go to really bad clinics that are third world. And then with economic growth similar to many other Latin American countries, inequality and poverty are much less pronounced in Cuba than in surrounding nations. Again, complete nonsense. But it's all irrelevant. The man is a dictator. The man executes people for fun. The man executed people for fun. And then Higgins said, Castro will be remembered as a giant among global leaders whose view was not only one of freedom for its people, but for all the oppressed and excluded peoples on the planet. Complete nonsense. But that is the president of Ireland. Well, President Higgins said to Mrs. Robinson, back off, lady. I can be even more obsequious to a dictator than you. And, Mary McAleese, I think every president of Ireland is called Mary, every female president. She said to Higgins, hey, hold on. Hey, Higgins, hold my beer, because wait till you hear what I can do. So Trinity College Dublin, which is the oldest college in Ireland, historic. They have a beautiful library, Book of Kells. Movies are shot there. It's a real old, hundreds and hundreds of years university with a great reputation. They wanted to give the Dalai Lama an honorary doctorate, and Mary Robinson has become the provost, i.e., the president of Trinity College, and she objected to his getting an honorary doctorate and basically blocked the Dalai Lama from getting an honorary doctorate at Trinity College Dublin because China, the leadership of China, would be upset. And that could affect their bottom line and could have a diplomatic backlash because there are Chinese students enrolled and there's Chinese money coming into Trinity. But also, she didn't want the diplomatic headache of honoring the Dalai Lama and angering the Chinese leadership, the Chinese communist leadership. I mean, and these people, she is on the TV, on the radio all the time, talking about the evils of the Catholic Church and they need to apologize for this, they need to apologize for that. But the Chinese Communist Party to this day is doing things that is probably 10 times more evil than what the Catholic Church ever did in Ireland. But Mary McAleese, no condemnation there. Look, punching down, the Catholic Church is on the ropes, Mary McAleese, and you know that. So punching down to the Catholic Church is not a sign of bravery, it's a sign of cowardice. Bayoneting the wounded, is not brave. Standing up to the Chinese government, that's brave. Giving the Dalai Lama an honorary doctorate, that's brave. But Mary McAleese, you're a coward. President Higgins, you're an obsequious coward. Mary Robinson, you're an obsequious, greedy coward. And that's the leadership of Ireland. Whilst they laugh at how they love the royal family in the United Kingdom. I don't know if I had to choose which system I'd like more, but I'll tell you, the system of electing a figurehead president in Ireland has not produced the brightest and the best. So that's the end of the show for this week. We will be back next week. Michael Henney will be here, hopefully, back from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And don't forget to watch My Son Hunter. Go to mysonhunter.com, and thank you very much. Bye.